What happens?
Greetings and salutations, friends. We are here for our first ever roundup on Washington. On Washington, Caribbean American Legislative Week begins on June 21st, Monday. It's our 23rd annual Caribbean American Legislative Week. And joining me is Dervin Malcolm, who is well known to the Jamaican diaspora, but not so well known to other Caribbean diasporas. But we hope to change that in the coming months. What we at ICS are concerned about is that the Caribbean integration process can only be accelerated if there is more interconnection with the journalists across the region. So it is our vision to enable, to try to enable the acceleration and the strengthening of the CARICOM integration process by ensuring that when we speak to journalists, we're no longer speaking just to one country versus the other country, but we try to speak to more than one journalist at a time. But today, for the first time at last, we have our first Caribbean journalist in the room with us on our Iron Washington very special series. And I'm so delighted to thank and welcome my good friend Dervin Malcolm, who has interviewed me countless times on his diaspora show every Saturday. He has 2 to 3 hours engaging the diaspora around the world, from England, Canada, the US. And I really think other Caribbean islands might want to emulate Dervin's really good grasp on where the Jamaican diaspora is and what we're doing. And so it is in that spirit, because I'm a Jamaican, and he has decided to support us in being our very first host, co-host, co-anchor. I think I'm going to call him anchor of this first ever Caribbean American Legislative Week and Washington Nightly Roundup. So welcome, Dervin. Thank you for being our partner in this adventure, Caribbean cruise adventure.
Really, the cruise industry is back. Well, anyway, let's. Dr. Nelson, what a joy to join you and your colleague, Dr. Amala, which sounds more Jamaican than anything else. Jamaican, African, yes, as opposed to Amala. Well, that's a different matter. Dr. Amala Luncheon, it's a pleasure to meet you. How are you?
I am well. I'm well. Pleasure to meet you as well.
And well, I don't even have to ask how Dr. Nelson is doing. She has been humming. She has been buzzing.
Indeed.
Yes, but it's good to be a part of this experience, and I'm anxious to get a sense of how these engagement sessions, virtual engagement sessions, have been organized in the first place. As you said, this is Caribbean American Legislative Week. So let's just get that background out there. What's the essence of Caribbean American Legislative Week, Dr. Nelson?
Well, the essence of Caribbean American Legislative Week is for us to arrive in Congress and in Washington, D.C., like every other organized American group does, walk around the House of Congress, have meetings, complain, advocate, agitate, and basically get our voices heard. We started this in 1999 under the auspices of Congresswoman Donna Christensen. Here we are some 23 years later. It is because of her agitation in 1999 that brought us to the attention of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who became the godmother of the movement for Caribbean American Heritage Month, and indeed tabled the resolution that has resulted in us now having 16 years of commemorating June as National Caribbean American Heritage Month. So unlike the Caribbean, the way the Congress is structured is set up to engage participation from their citizens. And so every day when Congress was in session, you see people walk in the hall, sometimes in large groups, sometimes it's lobbyists, sometimes it's special groups, sometimes it's citizen advocates like we are. But there's room specially set aside for these kinds of meetings, and there are also sometimes use the same chambers where you see hearings on TV. Sometimes those hearing rooms are also made available for us to have private forums. Let's say private, nothing is really private in Congress because you can't really have a private meeting in a public building. But private organizations like an ICS, like the Israeli whatever lobby, like the Veterans of America, all these groups come to Washington, both on the House side and on the Senate side. And the last piece of it for to kind of anchor this in something, there's also like a center called the Visitor Center that was built maybe about 10 years ago or so. It's built underground. And in that space, you have only meeting rooms. So there's no offices in that building. And that's also a place where people go to meet with their Congress people, have meetings, have events. You rent it out. Let's say rent, you don't have to pay for the space, but you have to pay for the food and the water and those things. But your congressperson or your senator gets the space for you, and under their auspices, you have the room to do meetings. So we have had meetings in Rayburn and the Senate side and in that center over the course of the last 23 years. It's very exciting. And for me, I always get a thrill when, me and about 10 of us are strolling through Capitol Hill and, we feel like, oh, it's like a girl from Jamaica is walking the hills of Congress. You feel important. But it really gives you a sense of understanding that democracy is about the politicians' response to what the people want.
Yeah, Dr. Luncheon, do you get a sense that when Caribbean people speak, or people of African, Caribbean, American heritage speak, that Congress actually listens?
I think it's set up in a way where they're meant to, as long as it's done in the right way. And so today we heard a lot of people remind us that it is necessary that we hold them accountable because they're being paid by our taxes. And it's important, whether those are sales taxes, whether those are income taxes or whatever. Representative Donna McLeod from Georgia today, she reminded us that she is there working for us with our tax dollars. And so we are, I want to say, inviting people to advocate by writing to Congress, by calling Washington, and doing those things to let them know that we exist.
Mm-hmm. And so I get the impression then, and it seems to be the way you do it normally, Dr. Nelson, has anything changed significantly in terms of how you prepare for Caribbean American Legislative Week?
No, because, well, obviously with the COVID, we can't physically go in Congress. It was very challenging. People are working from home. Normally, about February of every year, I do what I call a walkabout. And so I walk about on Capitol Hill and I pop into people's offices unannounced and say, hey, I'm here. And who's the new staffer responsible for Caribbean Affairs? Or who's the new staffer responsible for Foreign Affairs? Or whatever angle, because I already have made my list of who I want to stop by. And I pick up those cards and chit chat and see if I can find anybody who kind of feels kind of fuzzy, like they want to get to know you kind of thing. And then I sort of pick that. If I find someone like that in the office, I know I have a potential ally going forward. Because at the end of the day, no matter how lowly or how young, sometimes you have these young, fresh face just out of college people in these offices. They are the power between you and what you want, right? What you want is you want to speak to the legislative assistant that's responsible for the issue and to get your issue on the agenda. And you also want them to like the scheduler and to like you enough to tell the scheduler to try and make space for you on the calendar for the congressperson. So there's a song and dance, and normally I will be doing that February, March, April, running down to the hill, walking up and down in the halls, and pressing the flesh. And sometimes staff change every 2 years, so I'm having to know new people. Sometimes staff change, but they're still in Congress, which is not so bad, because then at least you can find them in somebody else's office. But if they go away, you're starting from scratch. So it's a song and dance, understanding the way it is and understand how staff think and how you have to become an asset. Staff has to see you as an asset and not a hindrance to getting their work done.
Yes. How did you get involved, Dr. Luncheon?
Earlier this year, when I was done with my doctoral study, I wanted to find a Caribbean think tank. And so I found Dr. Nelson, and that the rest, as they say, is history.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed you're co-chair for prosperity.
The prosperity, yes. So we have a couple of
Explain,
different
please.
pillars.
Uh-huh.
We have different pillars that we work on. So there's health, there's education, there's diplomacy, security, prosperity. So on the prosperity, because I studied management, on the prosperity, we have the blue economy, we have creative economy, and so things that agriculture, agribusiness, that sort of thing. Those are the things that fall under prosperity.
Right. So today, Dr. Nelson, the focus has been on domestic policy.
Yes.
So it's a classic case of, as we say in Jamaican parlance, you dance a yard before you dance abroad.
Exactly.
Yes, yes. Take
Yes.
care of business at home.
Yes,
Before.
because
Yes.
people have been reeling from the, the impact of COVID. I mean,
Yes.
people lost their jobs. In New York, we had a high loss of jobs, a high loss of people. People know how many Caribbean people work in the front lines in the healthcare industry in New York, in Florida, in Atlanta. So our people have been very much on the front line. And so today was great because we had Caribbean American elected officials participating, and we began the day with the census, but the census session was just like a webinar about how to use the data, and we learned a lot in that process. So it's really a good day and a nice way to get started. And the vision for today really was to begin to engage with Caribbean American local elected officials, meaning we're talking about city council members, state senators, state representatives, county council members, mayors of small towns. It was very exciting. We have unveiled a person from Belize Heritage in the great state of Kansas. We are so excited to meet that somebody from Kansas has a parent who was born in Belize. So we're very excited about that. We now have an entry point into Middle America.
What are your impressions of this movement that is very well represented by the Institute of Caribbean Studies? As a young person coming into the fold, so to speak, didn't want to ask Dr. Nelson that because that would be maybe asking her to grade her own paper.
And although she can do that very well, I would say that I think a lot of work has gone into where ICS is now, because this is the 16th outing of National Caribbean American Heritage Month. There were several years of lobbying for it to get to the point where we got the first proclamation by George Bush in 2006. So this year is our 16th outing. But it has grown from strength to strength. I mean, I see some of the things that were done before and so on, but now we're getting people to understand the importance of advocacy. I think that's one of the key things that we're looking at this year, in addition to having people in the region understand what our work here could be, how we can help. So we've done, a number of different panels prior to this, and this week is where we're just dealing with legislative stuff, because the paper, we have a green paper out, and that paper actually informs the work that the U.S. State Department does with the Caribbean. So there, all the pillars that we mentioned before, there's something under each of those pillars, and we were strategic in terms of picking the panels for today and for the remainder of the week, because we need to help guide, the work that the State Department would be doing.
So from what you've been able to gather, Dr. Nelson, what's the consensus on the census?
The consensus on the census is that we won't know the answer to that until October. They say they won't be announcing the actual results for 2020 census until around September. So what they did today was kind of run us through the how to access data, and it's really a very powerful tool. Just to put a sticky thing, the census does support developing countries and train developing countries how to run their census and how to improve their data. So I'm really hoping going forward we'll be able to get the census to support our governments in the Caribbean region to improve the data gathering so that the democracy can be more effective. We really wanted to get to the point where we have a participatory observing, if you will, of some of the development finance spending or what's happening with the healthcare. So today on the census, they were able to tell us like the hotspots in COVID. They had a map. You yourself could go down and find that. That's the kind of thing we want to do with the census going forward. So it was a very interesting presentation, and we're hoping that we can get to see our small island states, small island developing states, move in that direction.
Well, the hot button issue continues to be not just a hot button issue, but a politically polarized issue, and that's immigration. And I don't think that's going to be other than it has been for some time to come. Or am I being pessimistic, Dr. Nelson, in that regard?
Well, as everybody knows, I don't speak much on immigration. Perhaps that might be a question better addressed to Dr. Luncheon.
Please, Dr. Luncheon.
Yeah, this is me putting on my cape here. So the thing is, with immigration, the two lawyers that we had on today, one was of Haitian descent and one was of Jamaican descent. One deals with, they both deal with immigration, but one is actually dealing with like border issues now. Because Haitians have a lot of issues at the border, as we know. One of the things that she was keen to say is you need to ensure that whatever your status is, like you're not granted asylum at the border. There were some things that, we sort of learned today as we were listening. However, if you get here and you have an issue, there's a process that you need to go through. So people show up thinking that, they're going to be granted asylum, and it's not that. So she explained that process to us. Also, she wanted to make sure that we understood if you ever get into the system, technically, like if you have an issue and you get into the system where you now have a record, then that could be used against you. So you want to make sure that if you're in that immigration process, if you're getting a green card, if you have a visa that is going to expire, whatever the issue is, stay on the straight and narrow. So avoid the domestic issues. If you have an argument with your wife or your husband, walk away. Because if the police come to get you, then there's a record and that can be used against you. So she really spoke about being able to sort of protect yourself during the immigration process. She was keen to say, or they were both keen to say, that the laws have not changed. But the application and how government treats with those laws, that's where you sort of have a disconnect or a little bit of a moving away from it or so on as the different governments change, but the laws are the same. And it's incumbent that you get a trained person, so you get an attorney to go through those things with you as opposed to winging it, really. But, immigration is an issue that it's going to be there for a long time.
Yes, as will healthcare, and what with the recent Supreme Court ruling re-Obamacare, there are a lot of lessons coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic as well. Well, we're pretty much still in it, but in this realm, a lot of lessons to be learned. I can just imagine how engaging that session might have been. The one focused on health.
Actually, health, I think, was quite interesting, and because we had two counselors there. They were both from Massachusetts, but they had sort of different perspectives. But one of the main things that we addressed, here's Francine, who speaks about health. Let me just say this, and then Francine can probably jump in. One of the things that we wanted to look at was equity, health equity, or on the other side of the coin, disparity, because those things are important. Francine, you came in just as we were discussing what happened with health today.
Your timing is impeccable. Hello, Francine.
Francine, you're muted.
Unmute, please. Still not hearing you.
You have a sound problem.
Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, much better.
Yes, good. Hi, Derwin. I was listening along. Great. Yes, it was so interesting because the health session was really interesting for me because I was, a lot of the sessions I do around health are kind of medically, slanted, learning more about disease process, whatever. But we're looking at it from policy making and having the type of guests that we had, which were, policymakers. They have to report to their constituents about whatever they may be in need of. It was a different conversation for me, but it was a good conversation. I I think that we left the session knowing that we have a lot of work to do. And I think we have put together at least the beginnings of a foundation. Wouldn't you guys say the beginnings of a foundation of people who are ready to make some changes? We know about the disparities. It was very clear what happened in the pandemic. It brought to light a lot of things that people had been saying all along about healthcare and healthcare delivery for people of color and minority communities, so we want to look for the fixes, and I think we have the people in place and they're interested in making the fixes happen. What else did we talk about? Vaccinated versus non-vaccinated. We talked about that too. Just being proactive. It looks like how should I say? That's a hot button that could be a problem. Let's be real. It could be a real problem. When people are equating being able to work with being vaccinated, if you're not really convinced that vaccination is the best option for you. So those type of things we talked about today. I'm very excited about going back through our conversations, our recordings, and taking some more notes and trying to put teams together to address some of the issues. Yep. So here we go.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Education, another one. It's the foundation. We can't do anything or go anywhere without it. But it's so multifaceted, multidisciplinary. Where do you start as Institute of Caribbean Studies, and in seeking to inform policy that takes into account members of the Caribbean diaspora? How do you take on that behemoth?
Well, I will begin by saying that certainly last year after the COVID hit, we started having conversations between ICS and our partners, the Jamaican Northeast Diaspora, which is led by Dr. Karen Dunkley, who is a noted education advocate. She has a lot of experience in that sector and senior management experience. And we realized that one of the things we had to do was educate our parents in America about how to work with their kids online. Those parents would normally have their children go to school and they're at work, know how to find places to leave their children. So it was a lot of upheaval last year, and Jamaican diaspora Northeast also got engaged in helping to rescue stranded foreign students. So education really was all over. But I think today, and Dr. Mala can correct me if I'm wrong, today was again the focus on equity, digital access, training for parents, training for teachers, because we have, again, many of our community school systems which are underfunded and under-resourced and under whatever else you can think about. And so how do we now, as we're talking about going back, but we don't want to go back to what was. So how do we create a more disaster resilient education system where there's more equity in digital equity, first of all, for the teachers themselves, for the parents who have to still have some responsibility for supervising their children, right? And of course, some teachers who were actually teachers and parents had it doubly hard because they had to be dealing with their own children and dealing with the children online. It has been very challenging. And so what I think those cities, and who was again there again?
Education. Oh, go ahead.
For education?
Yes.
Yes.
So education, we had Senator David Haley from Kansas, State Rep Donna McLeod from Georgia, Councillor Quinton Zondervan, and Councillor Gurley Adrian.
Right. So we had 4 people from different states. So that was Boston, Georgia, and Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Massachusetts, Georgia, and Kansas, because 2 different places in Georgia, in Massachusetts. And that was a really rich discussion. So if I left anything out, please say it, Amala. I can't remember.
No, I think each person spoke about the disparities in their system, because Councillor Zondervan, his issue was that he lives in a rich area. And so for them, while it seems like, Cambridge is not suffering, they had their own issues, whereas other places, because they had poorer communities, it seemed a little different, but they all had some amount of disparity. People not having access to laptops and that sort of thing. That was everywhere.
Do you think the growth of participation and interest by members of the Caribbean diaspora in the political directorate at the local level and other levels, do you see that? How hopeful are you that if you grow the level of participation of Caribbean people to occupy decision-making positions, that will in fact make a difference?
Very hopeful, because for us it's important to have people who understand the issues, coming from, they're looking at it with the same lens that we view them. So, just being able to talk to them, and see that they understand the issues, and they talk to, Black and brown people of color, that it does make a difference.
Yes. And so, well, Dr. Nelson, I was told half an hour, and it looks like 8:30. I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Well, we have 3 minutes to go. We have been live for, on the left-hand corner of the clock, says 27:12.
Yes. All right. So then, what are how would you sum up today? I don't know, Dr. Nelson or Dr. Luncheon, because it seems you were in every session, and you have one of those brains that stores data, which helps with the recall, which you do quite efficiently.
I think today was exciting. I'm energized for the remainder of the week. I mean, we're going into some heavy topics because we're dealing with people from the region, talking about their issues, along with partnerships from the US side. So tomorrow, for instance, we're starting with diplomacy, and we have a couple of panels of diplomacy, and then we get into the heavy topic of security. So we're dealing with trafficking. So that we have a couple of hours to deal with security, and we have panel members or panelists from all across the region. Very, very interesting stuff coming up tomorrow, but heavy, so.
Yeah, because of trafficking, there's corruption, there's cybersecurity, we're talking about ocean diplomacy. We're also putting on the table the conversation for the first time, maintaining the Caribbean as a zone of peace. Right. And while it's important, because if you haven't heard, anybody, there were at one point there were gunboats lined up along the border of Venezuela and Guyanese waters. And so we were concerned when we heard that perhaps the US was going to send their SS whatever to kind of stand off. We're like, we don't want any standoff and corral in the Caribbean Sea. We kind of want to maintain our zone of peace. So we want to put it on the table, because we know with all the drug trafficking in the region, with all the narco trafficking, the gun trafficking, with also China playing a more heavy influence in what's happening in Latin America, and the probability of, a Chinese, let's say, outpost in the region, if somebody decides to sell them a private island, we could head for a very challenging place. So we want to stave that off. So we're very excited about what's coming up the pipe tomorrow. And the rest of the week, we have education and health, we have energy, and we have prosperity, and we have disaster resilience. And prosperity is huge. This is correspondent banking and agriculture and blue economy and development finance. So it's a really jam-packed week every day, from 9 to 6. I'm beginning with a groundation of poetry in the morning, just to settle us. Lunchtime, jazz hour, or jazz in 10, a 10-minute jazz break with the St. Lucia Police Band. We're really excited about, just really making it a place to lime, a place to vibe, and as I said, have a brain jam, a brain fest jam to kind of advance our common future.
Definitely looking forward to that, and I can't help but notice what looks like the image of Bob Marley etched onto a Saint Kitts Nevis
I
flag.
did not have a prior conversation with Dervan about it. I just need to say this morning, my question was, what kind of heresy is this? Why is Bob on the St. Kitts flag? That's not it at all, apparently. So
No.
It's all right. I mean, Nevis, which of course is a part of that Twin Island Republic, has quite a connection with the United States of America. You've given the United States of America the first Treasury Secretary, the great Alexander Hamilton, and all that he would have been able to do. So, hey, what does this say? That Marley means more than Hamilton. I'm just saying.
Well, it's actually a drawing of my son who I always talk about this, that I'm a reverse migrationist. I left with my children from the United States and raised my children in the Caribbean on the island of Nevis, and that was one of the best things I could have ever done. Yeah, I'm very, very proud of that. And they had
I
a
think it was an insidious thing on her part. Let me be honest. This young lady has Jamaican roots. She claims that somebody else drew the picture of her son. I said, that does not look like how I remember him to look. It looked like Bob. She said,
it does look like Bob.
but I think, I don't see it. I think that she secretly, although she grew up, spent so much time in St. Kitts Nevis, she secretly still has a hankering for Jamaica, and so subconsciously transmitted.
Thank you for your interpretation, Dr. Nelson. You're sounding no more like a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Folks, I want to thank you all. Thanks, Dervan, for joining us. I hope you have time to join us tomorrow. You know, I think really having you access to questions really helps us figure out what do people need to, because we know this stuff so well now. It's like we're just like, we think we're explaining what we're doing, but we're not really explaining it well. So we just are so grateful for you joining with us. Thank you, Francine. Thank you.
Humbled and honored to be a part of the experience. Looking forward to tomorrow, all things being well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Simone Edwards, the first Jamaican WNBA player, and I am once again honored to be named the national spokeswoman for Caribbean American Heritage Month. For the month of June and beyond, please join me as we celebrate the Caribbean Americans who have made incredible contributions to our society. Happy Caribbean American Heritage Month, everyone!